Hello guys! So, for this presentation I will be reading off my own website. Now, since my English is not that good, I recommend you to just click on the link to my website and read it yourself. But anyways, here's the video. First principle ontology. What is action? In this presentation, I will explore an interpretation of what is the fundamental rule of action. This is an attempt to figure out a first principle rule for what is even permitted to exist in this universe, what even initiates events. You can think of it as first principle ontology. Example of first principle ontology. Digital computers are built from coding, software, hardware, programming language, but at its most fundamental essence, which is its first principle ontology, it is ones and zeros. It is on and off switches, followed by logic gates, which is and or not. The interpretation presented is non-static ontology, which is basically change is fundamental. Introduction to non-static ontology. Action may imply there is a present state, which is time 1, that evolved from a priori state, which is time 0. This interpretation will argue if present state is the same as priori state, then no action is committed. Only if change occurs can we claim an event took place. Model clearly states that time 0 does not equal time 1. Presented model has clear falsibility by finding any example of present state equal priori state in nature. Basically, if you find any evidence of anything that is ontologically static in nature, that would be disproving this interpretation. Let me show you an analogy. If I pause a song, it doesn't matter how long I pause it for, it will always continue at the same timestamp. I can pause it for 2 seconds or 100 seconds, it doesn't matter, it will still continue at the same timestamp. The action of a song being played is only interpretable once present timestamp is different from priori timestamp. A song being paused is at a static timestamp and can't be listened to. Words that represent this ontology: change, delta, partial derivative, non-repetitive, non-static ontology. Present state does not equal priori state. Axioms. In this presentation, I will claim physics and equations are built on 3 forms of non-static ontology. One of them being change. An example of change is phase transition. The other is something awaiting change. An example could be kinetic energy. The third would be landscape for change. An example would be symmetries. Also, energy equals the ability to do work, which equals enforcement of non-repeatability, as more work implies more action, and more action implies more present state is different from priori state. Lastly, I would say Bowman mechanics is a model that fits very nicely into this interpretation. The reason is that action always evolves from a particle. The particle has a present state that evolved from a priori state and are non-static to its core. So let's get into the arguments for non-static ontology. Let's start off with charge. 2 of the same charges repel, 2 different charges attract. 2 of the same charges is repetitive and would contradict with non-repetitive ontology, and repulsion between them is delivered to ensure this ontology remains. 2 different charges creates a greater set of non-repeatability and is a permitted action. Attraction follows from non-repetitive ontology. Similar principle for quantum chromodynamics. there is always neutral color charge, as any excessive amount of red, green or blue charge is introducing repeatability. Next argument, Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There is always quantum fluctuations and non-zero Kelvin at measurement. Delta position and momentum is fundamental. Position and momentum smears inversely to each other. Presentated interpretation understands this smearing as to imply the time zero state of a position and momentum is repetitive, and uncertainty smearing is applied to avoid repeatability. Next argument, Pauli's exclusion principle. Two fermions can never occupy the same quantum state. Two fermions occupying the same quantum state is obviously introducing repeatability and would contradict with presentated ontology. Bosons are non-static in other domains. Next argument, wave function. Both electron and photon inhibits a constantly fluctuating phase to its wave function. It's non-static to its core. Photons are additionally non-static in spatial movement. Next argument, frequency. A counter-argument to non-repeatability could be frequency, as frequency implies there is a repetitive amount of cycles. But the more frequency there is, the more energy there is. And energy is the potential to do work, which means more action, which means also more present state is different from prior state. And non-repeatability is applied. So next argument, Schrödinger equation. Schrödinger equation is a first principle equation in physics. Schrödinger equation at its most fundamental form includes h-bar, complex number, and partial derivative. Partial derivative describes rate of change. Let me introduce you to a speculative hypothesis. Imaginary number in Schrödinger equation is often demonstrated as an imaginary axis. In my technical model, I claim the imaginary axis is a repetitive 1 degree of freedom state, and since change is ontological, anything real has to be present state is different from prior state. Present state of axis position then emerges phase and amplitude to ensure non-static ontology. New degrees of freedom emerge. Here, prior state is actually the imaginary number. Since imaginary number is non-spatial, I argue that the fundamental repetitive state that is unapproachable, if we assume out non-static ontology, is the imaginary axis. From this foundation, you can build up the emergence of higher degrees of freedom. More details on my technical model. Next argument, momentum. This interpretation will analyze momentum to move away from a priori repetitive state. This is continuous as backtracking is repeating priori state. It moves at a coordinate that is repetitive to a new constant speed away from that set coordinate. An example, when I hit a billiard ball with momentum, the billiard ball moves along the direction of momentum. Momentum is to describe a repetitiveness in priori direction, and new direction is to move away from such repetitiveness. It can't move backwards as such backtracking is to repeat prior state. And motion is continuous away from such prior state. It's completely synonymous with Newtonian mechanics. Next argument, time. Time always moves forward, not backward. as past state will remain a ultimate state of repetitiveness, leading to an unapproachable state. An event can't unfold twice. I can't change a fact from the past. It's treated as a 1 degrees of freedom trajectory away from past that spacetime adapts to. Next argument, time dilation. Clocks move differently depending on how stationary a object relatively is. Let me show you an example. A paused simulation, which is static and repetitive, is less mature than a resumed non-paused simulation, which is continuous and non-repetitive. Let's assume simulation 1 is paused more than simulation 2. Then simulation 1 would have less time relative to simulation 2 as it's less matured. Here's a postulate. Action is in between space and time. Action may select time to move or an object to spatially move. An object moving at high speed away from Earth will have more action in spatial non-repetitiveness, which is moving coordinates, relative to an object remaining stationary at Earth with more action in non-repetitiveness in time. Next argument, inertial. A spaceship experiences a g-force when the rocket accelerates. The reason g-force is applied is repetitiveness from momentum exchange, which is force exerted on the spaceship. G-force is a non-static application to an object. If we experience a slow gradual drop in g-force after accelerating, this g-force drops as its repetitive value. Again, non-repeatability ensures g-force value gradually diminish to stay non-static. Next argument, gravity. There is more action around a large gravitational body with particle interactions rather than a small gravitational body. These particle interactions develop less local repetitiveness, as action implies more different configurations. Non-static ontology attracts action, and two bodies of mass combining develops greatest set of non-static product. Space, which is geometry of non-static ontology, warps towards those destinations to ensure non-static ontology is followed. It's limiting degrees of freedom trajectories towards gravitational bodies. You may also think of space as the ontology of non-static landscape and action of mass consuming this ontology, warping space. Next argument, particles. Particles is the fundamental ontology, the thing in itself that is repetitive. We treat particles as zero-dimensional. Zero-dimensional is spatially non-real as it should be because this is the repetitive object in itself. Remember, repetitiveness can't be real in a non-static universe. Zero-dimensional is also included in my discrete geometry model where it builds up higher dimensional degrees of freedom to maintain non-static ontology. Bohmian mechanics has a 0D particles included into its own version of Schrödinger equation. Next argument, singularities. Singularities is the ultimate spatial repetitiveness. Infinities are needed to ensure non-repeatability. My technical model analyzes singularities as zero-dimensional. Next argument, atoms. Atoms are logically consistent in being non-repetitive from electron orbitals and chromodynamics, which is already non-static. Therefore, the quantum superposition decohere to a single state coordinate over a set time that is repetitive, it being magnetic quantum number, and proton neutron coordinate. A macroscale structure remains at an static coordinate over a set time as its internal dynamics is already consistent in being non-static. Therefore, it's a permitted thing to exist in this universe. Next argument, entropy. Entropy is to always increase degrees of freedom with time, which is equal to expand non-repeatability. The exceptions are heat flow, mixing of gases, friction, and thermalization. All of those has their own properties of non-repeatability. Next is quantum field theory. Quantum field theory is different landscape for non-static ontology. It's different dimensional grounds for non-static evolving. Example, photons are totally non-static in spatial movements. Fermions are non-static in spin alternation. So, here's the conclusion. This hypothesis is trying to argue why the universe operates on non-static ontology. It's taking a deeper look at fundamental principles that may have been overlooked by pre-assuming action. For this philosophy to be correct, it will be required to have an explanation for literally anything in the universe. The biggest challenge for this model may be how to reproduce the exact same maths in physics based on nothing else but this first principle. My technical model attempts to do this in a way using discrete spatial dimensions similar to crystallography. Here are some examples. Zero-dimensional. We have particles, singularities, time, 1 degree of freedom over complex number in Schrödinger equation. With one-dimensional, we have entanglement. Two-dimensional, we have photon polarization, liquid surface tension. With three-dimensional, we have photon polarization plus vector, and we have spatial dimensions. I just want to end this video by pointing out there is this philosopher named Deleuze which has taken this concept of change to understand philosophy of mind and environment. I do have a website where I have been trying to identify consciousness through the same approach as his. Please check it out. Thank you for watching.